This is going to be so good. Now, you might not recognize this person, but you would definitely know the voice. So this is Rebecca Zandbergen from London Morning. And Rebecca, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know it's not easy for interviewers to be interviewed.
It's
I'm
true.
it's true, I know, but I really appreciate you doing it. We've got lots to talk about, but I really want to talk to you because you went to journalism school at Carleton with my oldest daughter, Kathy,
I did.
all
Yeah.
those years ago. And I told her I was talking to you today, and oh, she wants me to send the link for sure when this is all done. But you went to journalism school there some 20 years ago, if I remember when Kathy was there. You graduated. Where did you go from there?
I went a lot of different places, but the first place I went was to Nunavut. I worked in the Iqaluit
Wow.
station, and I did that right out of school. Like I missed my graduation, just right out the doors up there, and didn't really know what I was doing, brand new. And then from there, I just sort of bounced around. Like I think I've worked in 12 CBC locations across the
Well,
country. So
wow.
yeah, it's been a busy 20 some years.
Well, did you have kind of a favorite, or were they all have their value?
I mean, they all have their value. I really do have a fondness for the East Coast. I spent some time in Halifax and Sydney. Yeah, but the North is there's nothing quite like that either. You feel like your work is more valuable.
Yeah,
CBC exists to get into regions such as that. So I think that yeah, it was really special to be in places like that as well.
that's really good. And
Mhm.
I think I read somewhere that you were at Carleton and you listened to your professor who talked about the unique ability of sound, and that you responded to that because I know a lot of people think of television when they think of media, but you really did think of radio from the outset. Is that correct?
I did, but I will say that it was kind of by coincidence, or kind of it was a bit of an accident. I had been trying to get into TV, to be honest, and then I think you had to register by your name, and because my last name starts with Z, I had the last crack at trying to get in. So
Hmm.
the TV program was full, and but I'm very thankful that it was because you're right. There's a richness to radio that is not. It's different in television, so I've really come to enjoy working in radio. I wouldn't trade it for anything at this point.
Yeah. Well, there's something about your voice that's very welcoming and open, and I know that personally just from being interviewed by you. I do remember I was part of a group from London that was trying really hard years ago to get CBC to come to London again. It had
Oh,
previously, and then it came, and of course, it moved into the downtown area, and we were just all so excited. But when did you start here in London?
so I was here when we opened, and I think that
Yeah,
was 2017.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think we launched in May or June. And so there were a team of 12 of us who were hired. And then I think 2 weeks before we were first on the air, we met in the library, sort of part of the building here, and we talked about, our goals and how we were going to do this. And so I was part of that startup team that got us on the air. So yeah, I moved here for this job for launching the station. So, well, I shouldn't say the station because there was a very tiny contingent here before we all filled in the cracks. But I think there were two reporters who were staffed here. But other than that, there were no shows and there was no
Right.
team per se. So it was nice to get off the ground and yeah,
Yep. I
have that.
remember meeting Bernard Graham, and of course was also part of setting all that up here. He had come from Calgary, which is where I'm from, and
Right.
he met with us and told us all about you and stuff. It was great, and then I think it was just a few months later we had Sounds of the Season, if you remember. CBC does that, all over the place, but it helps food banks in the month of December,
Mm-hmm.
which we appreciated and we'd known about. But the thing I liked best about it, and I still do, because you still do it every year, and we really appreciate it. You raise funds and you raise food, but it's the coverage you give the issues, which to me
Mm.
has been really important. And I have kind of learned from listening to you. When I listen to your interviews, you don't tend to interview the run of the mill personalities of people that are always on the media. You tend to like the narratives of people that are in particular situations, and they're kind of average people just in these situations. And it's interesting listening to how you bring that out of them. When you came to London, you came at a very interesting time. I think that we were struggling, right? The whole issue of poverty and things like that were really getting stronger. As a food bank, we were noticing changes were beginning to happen. But what I appreciated about talking with you during that December, I think we talked 3 times or so,
Mm.
was that you wanted to get down to the granular level of what's it like for a client
Hmm.
to the food bank, and I've never forgotten that. That was really great. Since you have come, it seems to me that that has only become more prominent. The whole poverty issue, the homeless issue, mental health, hunger. Um, do you kind of feel that that's exploding, or no? You're just digging into it and just trying to cover it.
No, I think it's definitely more noticeable. And I think for us here on Dundas Street, which is where our station is, and it's kind of a thoroughfare for people who are experiencing homelessness, who are sleeping rough, who are trying to find ways to exist. They end up spending, a lot of these folks end up spending time. And these are the people who are on the extreme fringe, I think. But I
Yeah.
think that's just sort of signals of what we're seeing out there more generally. Um, and yeah, it's gotten so much worse, I think, since we started. And a lot of people will tell you it's the pandemic. And I'm not a researcher in so far as I don't talk to people to gather statistics and whatever, but from the people I've spoken to, time and time again, we hear that yes, it's gotten worse, and they have all the reasons why, and they have the statistics. So I certainly, not only from what I'm seeing outside my window, but from the people I've spoken to over the year, 2 years, since the pandemic has really started, that it just seems to have gotten so much worse. And it's really sad. I mean, I don't, it's difficult, and you look into the people's eyes who make this their life's work, such as you, and it's clear from talking to people that they are, um, at their wits end, and there needs to be some real change. And I know today we're hearing more today about homelessness and the city's solutions that are supposed to be coming. And but yes, it's gotten worse from what who I've spoken to and from what I've seen.
Yeah. It seems to
Yeah.
me that in Canada, I've been around a long time, but I lived for Calgary for a long time and used to listen to CBC with my dad and mom. But it seems to me that crises come in every country, and we adapt and we respond to them. And Canadians have been very good at that. But the first food bank started in Alberta in 1981 in Edmonton, right? And it was just a response to the recession that was happening at that
Mhm.
time. Citizens came together, government said they didn't have the funds to be able to help people that were hungry or whatever. So it was remarkable. And then in just a few years after that, London got started, all these other ones got started across the country. And the feeling was, okay, this recession will end and then we'll get back to where we were. And it never
Mm.
happened. The numbers remained high. And then I've been through 3 recessions since then, including the Great Recession in 2007. And that happened each and every time. So every time a crisis hit, Canadians would respond, but the problems lingered after the crisis was over. And I think COVID has just been the same. Somehow COVID has made things worse for all sorts of reasons, which I know that you're aware of, and most of us are kind of have an understanding of. But it
Mhm.
seems to me that homelessness and hunger, food insecurity especially, has just got way beyond the ability to manage. So it's this inability to take a crisis and then turn it into a real learning lesson and develop
Mhm.
their systems. And it seems to me that you in the media would be caught in that. Like you had a lot to cover during COVID for sure.
I
But
did just do an interview recently that was encouraging, and it was from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, who took, I think, stats from Statistics Canada that said during the pandemic, more kids were lifted out of poverty than before, and that was because of all of the various aid that was handed out, and it was aid that was designed for other reasons, but it trickled down to helping kids in those families. And so I don't know. And so maybe maybe we have, not by design, but efforts to help people seem to have helped in some ways.
right, and I think it was a pandemic that induced that, if I can say
Yeah.
that. I think the government supports during especially those 2 years, the first 2 years, were what also had people not need to come to the food bank as much because they had those kind of supports. So I think
Mm-hmm.
I think you're quite right there. But we were very much aware. during the course of the pandemic that agencies were really struggling. A lot of those agencies didn't get supports. The people that they were trying to help maybe did, but a lot of the agencies didn't. And the food bank stayed open because we were asked to. And suddenly our numbers started to go through the roof. But it's
Hmm.
because we were picking up from other agencies that were closed or were, limiting their
Right.
operations because of it. But I think you're quite right. But since the pandemic has ended, we at the food bank now we're almost at 29,000 people a month we're
Mm.
helping. Before the pandemic started, we were at 3,200 families a month. Now we're over 5,000, and we're breaking new records every week. So, I think there was a lot of good things that came out of the pandemic and got us to concentrate. I thought the empathy towards homelessness, for instance, was really strong during the pandemic. People really responded to issues there to try to help the homeless. But since it's kind of waned, the pandemic itself, all of a sudden these numbers, whether it's homeless or food insecurity or rents, all of those kind of things, it's just become like a major issue. It's like we we kind of put things on pause as we went through the pandemic rather than getting to some of those issues that were before the pandemic came.
Yeah.
Now it's burst out of control. It must be a very interesting time for somebody like you who's interested in talking to people about people, things, and what they're going through. It must be an interesting time to watch that kind of mushroom during your time in the
Yeah.
last year or two.
And I think that's part of it too, is that we talk a lot about the fringes, but then there are all of these people in the middle who are just struggling to the point where I think, and you've told me this, that they are sort of new clients that are struggling to the point where they can't buy food anymore. And I think we should be even doing more coverage of that group of people. I mean, I think we do a really good job of trying our best to cover the fringes, which obviously are something that deserves our attention. But there is sort of this quiet group of people, I think, that are growing and struggling to make ends meet silently, right? Like they seem as though they should be okay. They've got jobs, they've got somewhere to live, and yet they can't quite figure out the equation so that they're not feeling like they're drowning. And I think that's where a lot of probably what you're seeing is coming from, right? Like all of those people that are just, it's just become too much.
Yeah, if I can just say and ask you to be honest about it, I look at what's been going on, and today, as I'm interviewing you, the city is coming out with its final report on these health, the health summit it had, a lot of which had to do with mental health and homelessness. And, I was asked to be part of that from the beginning, and I refused. Now, the food bank was feeding a lot of those agencies, especially the homeless stuff that was going on, but the media was not included. And I felt, I don't know, just something rubbed me wrong there, and I could have easily been wrong on that. I know it's bothered some people that's the way it was, but to me it was the media that actually brought it to the forefront. Without the media, not just CBC but the others as well in the city, covering these stories and kind of the pathos that went around it, really made Londoners sit up and not just know that there's a problem, but they began to understand what it did to people and personalities. And the fact that the media did all that and was successful at bringing it to that level and then not have them included in these summits, I found difficult because I do believe that with the media comes the public. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I do think that they are a very, very important part of considerations. Of course, that would make sense if you're a food bank because it's largely the public that supports you. But I wonder how, do you agree with that? Or do you think, no, it was probably right, they didn't include the media? I don't know. It just seems to me something was missing there. That was my feeling. You have a sense on that?
Yeah, I think that we struggled with not being able to hear those conversations. I don't they I assume they had their reasons. But when we're talking about a community coming together to try to address a problem that is apparent to every Londoner, we were disappointed. I'm not gonna, that is a fair word to describe it. We were disappointed that we couldn't be there to hear those discussions. I know we're getting some information today, but we don't know sort of how we arrived at what we came to. Um, so I assume they had their reasons. Were we disappointed? Yeah, we were pretty disappointed that we weren't able to sit in on those conversations.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, that that needs to be said, not just so much by you, but even by the public. Like, we want to know. We've been investigating it,
Yeah.
investing in helping the agencies and other things, and all of a sudden now we're out of it. And I understand that it's sometimes difficult to want the media there because they might say something you don't like or whatever it is. I get all of that. But this is an all-in community solution that we're looking for here. And to me, the media was key, and it needs to be said. And I'm hoping we'll learn some lessons from that. I know, we've been criticized a bit for not being there, but we want to be part of any solution, as we have been part of the whole process. And the same with CBC and the other media, I know. It's just that I'm hoping that at some point we'll understand that you don't just throw these things to government and hope it'll get solved. It really is going to take all of community coming together and putting pressure on for these
Hmm.
companies to be dealt with. So I hope as we move forward that media is more included. I just find it essential, and I just find it odd that that wasn't there.
Yeah, we were disappointed
Yeah,
for sure, and didn't quite understand.
yeah,
So yeah, hopefully we learn more today. And if I'm, I know we have a reporter there right now, and
yeah.
I'm sure she's asking the questions that we want answers to. So yeah.
That's right. How do
Hmm.
you handle it, Rebecca? Because you talk personally to people very well. You draw things out of them, but a lot of these things are kind of confidential in nature. Do you know what I mean? Like, we help a number of homeless people through 519 Pursuit, for instance. So they're meeting with the people down by the river and stuff. And when we talk with them or work with them, they're very, very careful about revealing personal things about themselves, right? Which is totally right. Makes sense.
Hmm.
We suddenly invade their world. We're asking all of these questions, right? But for you, I would think, in the media in general, those stories are actually very important to rounding out the story and making it human. Do you find it?
Hmm.
Do you find it difficult bringing out some of those kind of details, or do you find that overall people, as long as you set the stage right, are willing to talk and be more personal?
Yeah, like, so we have a lot of, like, it's not just me, I should say. Like, we have a team of reporters who go out and have gone down to the river and have talked to people about what they're experiencing. And I think in general, it's surprising how much people are willing to share with us. If you find the right person who is interested in having a conversation and feels as though you're there to hear their story, I think some people want to be heard. They want to tell their story. They want people to understand that, and I think a lot of time they want to erase some of the perceptions that people assume about them, right off the bat. And I think giving them the opportunity to do that, I think, is helpful. And I think that often kind of shapes the interview. Like we're not bad people. Say hi to us, look in our eyes,
Yeah,
smile at us. Like
yeah,
we're here. And I think that um and the fact that people have a bad sense of some of the stuff we see on the street, and a lot of the people are like, that's, there's like one or two bad apples, and don't judge us all by the one thing you've
yeah,
seen. A lot of us are just out here just like you, and we made a wrong decision, we took a wrong turn, we whatever it may be, we got a divorce,
yeah.
and here we are, and it could be you. And I think that those conversations, when they're able to sort of dispel some of those myths, sort of prompts them to open up. They want people to know this could be you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can I talk to you about something else that I'm kind of worried about, if you don't mind? I
Hmm.
25 years ago, Jane and I, my wife, went to Sudan to fight slavery and also to build schools, establish women's programs. CBC came with us on that very first visit, and it really put the subject of South Sudan on the map as far as Canada was concerned. A lot of people didn't even know where it was or how it existed, and all of a sudden it got out there. And I remember the next year Jane got on the cover of Maclean's magazine holding on this little child from Sudan, and there was just so much awareness, and the Sudanese people themselves couldn't believe that somebody was actually paying attention to what they were going through. So now fast forward 25 years later, and here we are. And you know, I, we all know what's going on with the media. That there aren't the amount of reporters that there were. There's not the amount of investment that there was, especially in local things. And I just kind of get the feeling, after being at the food bank for almost 4 decades, that the lights are kind of going out, not turning on. Now, This is maybe the wrong way to put it, but it seems to me as we lose that kind of coverage and that kind of personal coverage, what we're doing is slowly people are going to retreat back into the difficulties of their lives without being able to tell it and get their stories out there, because the media itself is having so much trouble. And I know these are mostly corporate decisions that are made. I get all of that. I know that reporters are really caring. I get all of that too. But I have a worry, Rebecca, just that these stories that you have been telling, and others in the media, are so pivotal to moving the public forward. They come forward on a good narrative, not just on a statistic, right? It's really important. And I'm
Mhm.
worried that the lights are going out. Am I wrong?
Lights are going out in what sense? That people are not telling enough of those stories?
I think as media itself begins to go through these changes and pulling back,
Right.
not as many reporters and stuff, these stories won't get told. That's more what I mean.
Yeah, and you're you're not wrong, right? There are fewer reporters in London than there once were. We hear about cutbacks,
Yeah,
in other media, and it's really, while we opened up and have grown here, it's really unfortunate, but we've seen other media have to shut down, and we certainly want the more reporters we have in the city. I think the stronger we are as a community. So it's
yeah,
certainly something that we also sort of mourn when we see that happen. It's not good for anybody. It's certainly not good for the media, and it's not good for our community. So I think that, yeah, London, CBC right now in London is in a good position where we've just opened, and so we're
yeah,
doing our best to tell those stories. But I think it is becoming more difficult as the media is sort of under fire from a number of sides too. So I don't think you're wrong. I do think though that there is a strong interest right now. We see the city talk about it all the time. You see the media certainly having it high in our
yeah,
priority list of what we want to cover. So it's certainly at the top of our agenda. Whether or not we have the resources we wish we could have to cover
yeah,
it, is something else. But we certainly are trying. But you're right. We're shrinking.
yeah.
The landscape is shrinking.
I really do think that citizens and associations have to speak up. That's what happened a number of years ago when we all got together and decided we wanted to get CBC back to London. It was a long and protracted thing, and I was an MP at the time in Ottawa and was part of those kind of hearings that were going on in
Mhm.
Parliament. But there was a lot of citizen struggle to bring it to that point, and people listened, and it was great. But I hope the citizens will continue to speak up and say we need these stories, we want them, especially the local ones, because we can't really move forward without that kind of knowledge. Can I ask you? I'm just one of the workers in many different charities or nonprofit groups that are in the city. We all try to hold out what we think are the things that are really really important and things that need to be dealt with in different ways. What is it that is media you really want and need when it comes to these stories? Like, we don't just put out a press release and hope that you cover it, right? I mean, seriously, you are looking for things to be able to shape the story or whatever it is. What is it that we as agencies could do more, or even associations could do more to assist the media in their own pursuit?
I think, as you've mentioned, being able to tell a story with a narrative, i.e., through the eyes of someone who's living what you're talking about, and not a talking head, is always going to sell a story better. And by sell, I mean will make it resonate more with a listener or a reader. And also access to people's spaces, and that comes down to the hard work of the reporter, developing relationships and assuring them that you're telling the story fairly. But if you can get into the spaces of people so that you can see what they're living, and I think and be able to hear the sounds of the life that is difficult, it's hard to sort of tell a story without those
Yeah,
tactile feelings and pictures. And it's all of just, the more you can show someone and let them feel what they're feeling, I think the more people will care. And so, and it can be a good news story too. Like, I did this story not that long ago about the Salvation Army's, the Center of Hope, their program where they help people who are they have had addictions and they're trying to beat their addictions. It's not a recovery program, but it's kind of like an in-between where they have been in a recovery. And now they're trying to get themselves back on track. And I talked to two people who were living there on the special floor where they get to do this. And they were successful so far, like they had like a year, I think 18 months or something, where they were living clean and they had plans. And, I think those stories too, of hearing how they come out the other side, make those agencies doing the work that much more relevant and show Londoners, look, like here's why we need this agency in the city. And I think that's helpful too. But it's access to, and like the agencies can help with this because they know these people better than we do. Access to people who are going through it and have been through it, I think is what we need. And like that's asking a lot, because these are people who have been through a lot and maybe they don't have the capacity to deal with a reporter at that point. But it's a balancing act, for sure it is.
Yeah. I had lunch with a reporter last week from another media group, and they were saying, look, we don't have the numbers of reporters that we used to have. We don't even have the photographers or videographer numbers that we used to have for those things. We really depend on what he called intelligence. So this is something like it sounds like government kind of things, right? But the idea that you got eyes and ears on the ground who are picking up these stories and can direct that to the people that can actually tell the stories to the public. So I think it really is true that for those of us as agencies, or just even as average citizens, when you see something that you think is important to community or whatever, that you bring those stories to the media because they do have the expertise to know how to deal with those things and the reach to get it out to other people. But it seems to me that idea of citizens and agencies and others forming that kind of intelligence, they're the eyes and ears of community who then direct that towards media who can then cover it, because you guys just don't have the resources perhaps that you once did. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I think a willingness, if we come across someone that you may feel protective of, I just sort of a willingness to work together, right? Like if we've discovered something, I think that a willingness to try to, help us share this story that could have great insight for the community, I think is, and I mean, I'm always work very hard at being respectful of the sources in the story. If people are not comfortable, like I'm not comfortable, and obviously we don't want to do it. But if there is someone whose comfort level is where we need to do it, to do the story, then yeah, I think it is the by far the most successful way of telling a story that's going to hit listeners.
Just briefly, do you have a favorite story that you covered from here, from being in London?
A favorite story. I really like stories where people help each other. I just did a story the other day and it's kind of in the same vein. A couple of students, where were they coming from? I can't even remember. They were foreign students from which country? I can't remember, but they were, and then it was a guy who was selling his used car to these students, and then they bought his car. And then when he dropped off, he went to give them their paperwork, whatever. He went up to their apartment and saw that they had like nothing in their apartment. And so we started this sort of community funding drive or community drive to get them furniture. And it's these community stories that are like, yes, we need agencies, but examples of community helping community, I think are really, really powerful. And I think they inspire people to do that kind of stuff. So that was a good one.
Yeah, I think that's part of what makes you so special, and also CBC. CBC has just always been really good at that kind of stuff. Rebecca, thank you for doing this. I know it's not easy for you to be in front of the camera, so to speak, but I appreciate your willingness to do it. And I do want to say that your presence and the presence of CBC in the city really, when it transpired, it did up everybody's game, including your competitors, including us as citizens and organizations. We suddenly realized we had storytellers in our midst that have been doing this for a long, long time. And
thank you.
That did make a difference for us because we were all kind of feeling under pressure. And I thank you for bringing that kind of human impact to us, not just from the CBC, but from yourself. Thanks for what you're doing here in the community. I really appreciate it, Rebecca. And thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much, Glenn. I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me.
Yep.